The dispatch radio crackled with static as Officer Marcus Webb sat in his patrol SUV, finishing the last of his lukewarm coffee. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in Pinewood Falls, Oregon, a logging town tucked between the Cascade Mountains where the fog rolled thick and the nights stretched long. Marcus was 38, broad-shouldered with close-cropped dark hair graying at the temples. His hazel eyes carried the weight of 12 years on the force, most of it spent responding to domestic calls, bar fights, and the occasional lost hiker. Tonight had been quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that made every creak of the leather holster sound too loud. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. He was about to pull back onto Highway 26 when he saw it. A German shepherd stood in the middle of the road, illuminated by his headlights. The dog's fur was matted and wet, ribs visible beneath the coat. Its amber eyes locked onto Marcus with an intensity that made him pause. Marcus slowed the SUV to a stop and rolled down the window. The cold, mountain air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. "Easy there, buddy," he called softly. "You lost?" The dog didn't move. It just stared at him, ears forward, body rigid. Then it barked once sharp, commanding, and took 3 steps backward. Marcus frowned. He'd seen plenty of strays in his years, but none that looked at him like this. There was intelligence in those eyes, purpose. He opened the door and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The shepherd backed up again, then turned its head toward the dense forest to the east, barking twice more. "What is it, boy? Something out there?" The dog barked again, louder this time, then bolted toward the tree line. Marcus hesitated. Standard protocol said, call animal control, file a report, move on. But something about the way the dog had looked at him, the urgency in its movements, pulled at his instincts. He grabbed his flashlight and radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm following a possible lead near mile marker 14 on Highway 26. Animal behaving strangely. Checking it out." "Copy. Unit 7. Proceed with caution." Marcus jogged after the dog, his flashlight beam cutting through the fog. The shepherd stayed just ahead of him, glancing back every few seconds to make sure he followed. They moved through thick underbrush, branches scratching at Marcus's jacket, his breath coming in short bursts. After 5 minutes of hard hiking, the forest opened into a small clearing. Marcus stopped, chest heaving, and swept his flashlight across the area. That's when he smelled it. Smoke. Not the clean smell of a campfire, but something acrid, chemical. His pulse quickened as he followed the scent, the dog leading him toward a narrow dirt path that snaked deeper into the woods. Then he saw the glow. Orange light flickered between the trees, casting dancing shadows against the fog. Marcus broke into a run, the shepherd bounding ahead of him. They burst through the final line of trees, and Marcus's stomach dropped. A single-wide trailer sat in a small clearing, flames already consuming the rear half. Black smoke poured from broken windows, and the metal siding buckled and groaned under the heat. The front door hung open, smoke billowing out like a toxic cloud. Marcus grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I have a structure fire at an unregistered site off Highway 26, approximately half a mile east of mile marker 14. Requesting fire and medical immediately." "Copy. Unit 7. Units en route. ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes. The trailer would be gone in 5. The shepherd barked frantically, racing toward the open door, then back to Marcus, then to the door again. "Someone's inside," Marcus whispered, realization hitting him like ice water. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth, adrenaline overriding every ounce of training that said, "Wait for backup." The heat hit him in waves as he approached, the smoke thick enough to make his eyes water instantly. The dog darted through the door. First, Marcus followed. Inside, the world was chaos. Flames crawled up the back wall, devouring everything: cheap paneling, torn curtains, stacks of newspapers. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking. Marcus swept his flashlight across the narrow space, squinting through the haze. The shepherd was already moving toward the far end of the trailer, barking furiously near what looked like a small bedroom. Marcus stumbled forward, coughing, his lungs burning. He reached the doorway and shone his light inside. A child, a little boy, no more than 6 years old, lay unconscious on a stained mattress. His face was pale, lips tinged blue from smoke inhalation. He wore only a thin t-shirt and shorts, his small body curled into a ball. "Jesus," Marcus breathed. He scooped the boy into his arms, the child's weight almost nothing. The shepherd stayed close, pressing against Marcus's leg as they turned back toward the door. The flames had spread. The exit was half-blocked now, fire licking, across the doorframe. Marcus shielded the boy's face with his jacket and lunged through. They burst out into the night air, Marcus gasping, stumbling away from the burning structure. He laid the boy down on the wet grass, immediately checking for a pulse. Faint, too faint. He tilted the child's head back, cleared his airway, and began chest compressions. The shepherd stood over them, barking toward the forest as if calling for help that wasn't coming fast enough. "Come on, kid. Breathe. Breathe." Marcus switched to rescue breaths, counting, praying, refusing to stop. After what felt like an eternity, the boy coughed weakly. His eyelids fluttered, then opened wide, terrified, blue as a winter sky. "You're safe," Marcus said, voice hoarse. "You're safe now." The sound of sirens finally cut through the night. Marcus looked up at the shepherd, who sat calmly now, tail wagging once, eyes fixed on the boy. "You knew," Marcus whispered. "You knew he was in there." The dog tilted his head, then looked back toward the burning trailer as it collapsed in on itself with a roar of flame and sparks. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the structure was gone. But the boy was breathing, wrapped in Marcus's jacket, held close while the paramedics worked. And the German shepherd, the stray, who had appeared out of nowhere, sat quietly beside them, refusing to leave. The boy's name was Ethan Miller, and he had been alone in that trailer for 2 days. Marcus learned this from Child Protective Services the following morning, standing in the sterile hallway of Pinewood Falls General Hospital. Ethan's mother, Jessica Miller, had been arrested 3 counties over for drug possession and outstanding warrants. The trailer was an illegal squat, no utilities, no registered address. No one had known the boy was there, except the dog. Marcus stood outside Ethan's hospital room, watching through the window as nurses checked the boy's vitals. Ethan was awake now, pale and small against the white sheets, an oxygen mask over his face. His wide blue eyes followed every movement in the room, but he hadn't spoken yet. Beside Marcus sat the shepherd, cleaned up now by the hospital staff. The dog's fur was still rough and uneven, but his eyes were bright and alert, his posture calm. "You saved his life," said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Dr. Lena Park, a pediatrician in her early 40s, with kind eyes and silver-streaked black hair pulled into a neat bun. "Wasn't me," Marcus replied quietly. "It was him." He nodded toward the dog. Dr. Park knelt and stroked the shepherd's head. "What's his name?" "Don't know yet. He doesn't have a collar, no microchip. Vet said he's about 4 years old, malnourished, some old scars consistent with training, possibly military or police background." "And he just found you?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Led me straight to the trailer, wouldn't stop barking until I followed." "Doctor." Park stood, crossing her arms thoughtfully. "That boy wouldn't have lasted another hour. Smoke inhalation, dehydration, hypothermia. If you'd been even 5 minutes later." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Marcus looked down at the dog, who was staring through the window at Ethan with the same intense focus he'd shown on the highway. "Can I take him in to see the kid?" Marcus asked. Dr. Park hesitated, then nodded. Briefly. "And only if Ethan wants to." Marcus pushed open the door, the shepherd padding quietly beside him. Ethan's eyes widened when he saw the dog, and for the first time since waking, emotion flickered across his face. The shepherd approached slowly, ears forward, tail low and gentle. He stopped at the edge of the bed, waiting. Ethan's small hand reached out, trembling, and touched the dog's nose. "He saved you," Marcus said softly. "Found you in that fire and brought me to get you out." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. His voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "My friend." Marcus felt his throat tighten. The boy's fingers curled into the dog's fur, and the shepherd pressed his head gently against Ethan's chest, careful, protective. "What's his name?" Ethan asked, looking up at Marcus. Marcus glanced at the dog, then back at the boy. "I don't know yet. What do you think we should call him?" Ethan thought for a moment, his small face serious. "Blaze." Marcus smiled. "Blaze? I like that." The shepherd's tail wagged once as if approving. Over the next 3 days, Marcus returned to the hospital every chance he got. Blaze never left his side, sleeping in the patrol SUV at night, sitting patiently in the hospital parking lot during Marcus's shifts. The townspeople began to notice. Word spread quickly in Pinewood Falls, a place where everyone knew everyone, and stories traveled faster than the morning fog. By the end of the week, the local newspaper ran the headline, "Mystery Dog Saves Child from Burning Trailer Officer Credits Canine Hero." Marcus was sitting in the hospital cafeteria when Chief Raymond Torres found him. Torres was in his late 50s, a compact man with silver hair and a weathered face that had seen 3 decades of law enforcement. "Marcus," Torres said, sitting down across from him. "We need to talk about the dog." Marcus set down his coffee. "What about him?" "Animal control wants him. Says he's a stray, unclaimed. Procedure is to hold him for 7 days, then—" "Then what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice hard. Torres sighed. "You know what happens if no one claims him." Marcus's jaw clenched. "That dog saved a child's life, Chief. He's not going to a shelter." "I agree," Torres said, surprising him. "That's why I'm here." He pulled out a folder and set it on the table. "We've been talking about restarting the K9 unit. Budget finally came through last month. I want you to take lead on it." He tapped the folder. "And I want Blaze to be your partner." Marcus stared at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. He's got training. Anyone can see that. He's disciplined, intelligent, and he's already bonded with you. Get him evaluated by a certified K9 handler, and if he passes, he's yours." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "What about Ethan?" he asked quietly. Torres's expression softened. "CPS is working on placement. Mother's parental rights are being terminated. The boy's got an aunt in Portland, but it'll take time to process." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind already turning. "Make it happen, Marcus," Torres said, standing. "This town needs good stories. And that dog's given us one." 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the training yard behind the Pinewood Falls Police Department, watching as certified K9 handler Sarah Chen put Blaze through his paces. Sarah was in her 30s, compact and fierce, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd worked with military dogs overseas before returning stateside to train law enforcement K9S. "Sit," she commanded. Blaze sat instantly, eyes fixed on her. "Down." He dropped to his belly without hesitation. Sarah turned to Marcus, impressed. "This dog's had professional training, probably military, maybe private security. His responses are textbook." "Can you work with him?" Marcus asked. Sarah smiled. "I don't need to. He already knows what to do. You just need to learn how to handle him." Over the next month, Marcus and Blaze trained together every day. They ran drills in the forest, practiced search and rescue scenarios, worked on building trust and communication. But more than that, they became partners. Marcus learned that Blaze responded to hand signals better than voice commands, that he was gentle with children, but could switch to protective mode in an instant, that he had nightmares sometimes, whimpering in his sleep until Marcus's hand on his flank calmed him. And Blaze learned that Marcus could be trusted, that he would never abandon him, that they were in this together. On a crisp morning in late autumn, Marcus stood in the town square wearing his dress uniform. Blaze sat beside him, his new K9 vest fitted perfectly, the badge gleaming on his collar. Chief Torres pinned the official K9 unit patch to Marcus's shoulder, Officer Webb, I hereby certify you and K9 Blaze as Pinewood Falls' first active search and rescue team." The small crowd gathered town council members, fellow officers, local families erupted in applause. But Marcus's eyes were on the front row, where Ethan Miller sat in a wheelchair, still recovering. The boy's aunt, Rebecca, stood behind him, hands on his shoulders. Ethan was smiling, the first real smile Marcus had seen from him. After the ceremony, Marcus knelt beside the wheelchair. Blaze immediately pressed against Ethan's leg. "You doing okay, buddy?" Marcus asked. Ethan nodded. "Aunt Becca says I get to live with her. In Portland." "That's good, real good." Ethan's small hand found Blaze's fur. "Will you visit?" Marcus's throat tightened. "Every chance I get, I promise." "And Blaze?" Marcus looked at his partner, then back at the boy. "Blaze will come too. He's part of the team now." Ethan leaned forward and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. Blaze stood perfectly still, patient and gentle, his tail wagging softly. "Thank you," Ethan whispered into the dog's fur. 6 months passed. Winter settled over Pinewood Falls, blanketing the mountains in snow and turning the streets into quiet, frozen corridors. Marcus and Blaze worked together seamlessly now, responding to calls across 3 counties. Missing hikers, lost children, evidence searches. They were good at what they did, better than good. But it was the calls involving children that Marcus noticed Blaze responded to differently. The dog's focus sharpened, his movements more urgent, as if some part of him remembered why he'd been placed on this path. It was a Saturday afternoon when Marcus received the call. "Unit 4, we have a report of a missing child near Cascade Ridge. 8-year-old girl. Last seen 2 hours ago. Family's frantic." Marcus grabbed his keys. "Come on, Blaze. We've got work to do." They arrived at Cascade Ridge, a popular hiking area, within 20 minutes. The girl's parents stood near the trailhead, the mother sobbing, the father pacing, phone pressed to his ear. Marcus approached, Blaze at his side. "I'm Officer Webb. This is K9 Blaze. We're going to find your daughter." The mother looked at the dog, hope flickering in her red-rimmed eyes. "Please, she just wandered off. She's only 8. Marcus knelt, holding out the girl's jacket for Blaze to scent. The dog pressed his nose to the fabric, inhaling deeply, then lifted his head and looked toward the forest. "He's got something," Marcus said. "Stay here. We'll bring her back." They moved into the forest, Blaze leading the way. The trail was rough, snow covering most of the path, but the dog moved with confidence, nose to the ground, occasionally pausing to recalibrate. After 30 minutes, Blaze stopped abruptly. His ears pricked forward, body tensing. Marcus followed his gaze. A small figure sat beneath a large pine tree, knees pulled to her chest, shivering violently. The girl's face was pale, lips blue, her pink jacket soaked through. "Hey there," Marcus called gently, approaching slowly. "Your parents sent us to find you." The girl looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I got lost." "It's okay. You're safe now." Blaze moved forward, pressing against the girl's side, sharing warmth. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "He's so warm," she whispered. Marcus radioed their position, then wrapped his own jacket around the girl. "What's your name?" "Sophie." "Well, Sophie, this is Blaze. He's really good at finding people." "Is he magic?" Marcus smiled, looking at his partner. "Something like that." When they emerged from the forest, Sophie's parents rushed forward, tears flowing freely. The mother dropped to her knees, pulling her daughter into her arms while the father shook Marcus's hand over and over. "Thank you. Thank you so much." But Marcus's eyes were on Blaze, who sat calmly, watching the reunion with that same quiet intensity. "You did good, partner," Marcus murmured, scratching behind the dog's ears. Blaze's tail wagged once, as if to say, "Just doing my job." That night, back at his small cabin on the edge of town, Marcus sat on the porch with Blaze lying at his feet. The stars were bright, the air cold and clean. "You know," Marcus said quietly, "I used to think I was just going through the motions. 12 years on the force, nothing to show for it but reports and traffic stops. Blaze lifted his head, amber eyes reflecting the porch light. Then you showed up, led me to Ethan. Gave me a reason to believe this job means something. The dog stood, patting over to rest his head on Marcus's knee. Marcus stroked the thick fur, his voice rough. I don't know where you came from, or what you've been through, but I'm glad you found me. Blaze's tail thumped softly against the wooden boards. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called through the darkness. The mountains stood silent and eternal, watching over the small town that had learned to believe in second chances. And in the warmth of that quiet moment, Marcus understood something profound. Sometimes salvation doesn't announce itself with trumpets or miracles written in the sky. Sometimes it arrives on four paws, with scarred fur and knowing eyes, asking only that you follow. 1 year after the fire, Marcus stood in the Pinewood Falls Community Center, looking out at a room filled with faces. Veterans in worn jackets, families with young children, local officials, and members of the press. Chief Torres was at the podium, his voice carrying across the space. A year ago, a stray dog led one of our officers into a burning building to save a child's life. That single act of courage inspired us to create something bigger. He gestured to Marcus and Blaze, who stood together near the front. Today, we're proud to announce the expansion of the Pinewood Falls K-9 Search and Rescue Program. Thanks to state funding and community donations, we'll be training 4 additional dogs and handlers over the next 6 months. Applause filled the room. Marcus stepped forward when Torres motioned to him. He cleared his throat, unused to public speaking. I'm not good with words, he began, but I know this. The bond between a handler and their K-9 isn't just about training. It's about trust. It's about showing up for each other when everything else falls apart. He looked down at Blaze, who sat perfectly at his side. This dog saved a life because he refused to give up. He taught me that sometimes the smallest act of paying attention, following a lead, trusting your instincts can change everything. His voice grew stronger. So, if this program does one thing, I hope. It reminds people that heroes don't always wear badges. Sometimes they wear fur, and sometimes they just need someone willing to listen. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, families crowded around to meet Blaze. Children petted him gently while Marcus answered questions about the program. Near the back of the room, Marcus spotted a familiar face. Ethan Miller stood with his Aunt Rebecca. The boy had grown taller, healthier, his cheeks no longer hollow. He wore a navy blue hoodie and jeans, a small backpack slung over his shoulder. Marcus excused himself and made his way over. Blaze followed, tail already wagging. Ethan, Marcus said warmly, you made it. The boy grinned. Aunt Becca drove me. I wanted to see Blaze. The dog pressed against Ethan's legs, and the boy dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around the shepherd's neck. I missed you, Ethan whispered. Rebecca smiled at Marcus. He talks about you both all the time, about the night you saved him. Blaze. Saved him, Marcus corrected gently. I just followed orders. Ethan pulled back, looking up at Marcus with serious eyes. When I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to help people. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He crouched down to Ethan's level. You already do, kid. Every time you smile, every time you keep going, you're helping everyone who hears your story believe things can get better. Ethan hugged him then, quick and fierce. When they pulled apart, the boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I drew this for you. Marcus unfolded it carefully. The drawing showed a police officer and a German shepherd standing in front of a burning building. Above them, in careful crayon letters, were the words, Heroes don't quit. Marcus's vision blurred. He folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Thank you, Ethan. I'll keep this forever. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus walked outside with Blaze. The afternoon sun hung low, over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and amber. Chief Torres joined them on the steps. You did good in there, he said. Just told the truth. Torres nodded, hands in his pockets. You know, when I first heard about that dog leading you to the fire, I thought it was luck. Coincidence. And now? The chief smiled. "Now I think some things are meant to be. That dog found you for a reason, Marcus. And you were ready to listen." Marcus looked down at Blaze, who sat calmly, watching the sunset. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I guess I was." 3 years later, the Pinewood Falls K-9 program had become a model for rural departments across the Pacific Northwest. 8 teams now operated across 3 counties, responding to missing person cases, disaster relief, and community outreach. But it was Marcus and Blaze who remained the heart of the program. On a spring morning, Marcus stood in the training yard, watching as new handlers worked with their K-9 partners. Blaze sat beside. Pim, gray now beginning to show around his muzzle, but his eyes still sharp and alert. Sarah Chen approached, clipboard in hand. "You thinking about retirement?" she asked, nodding toward Blaze. Marcus smiled. "He's still got a few good years left. But yeah, I think about it." "What will you do?" Marcus watched as a young handler successfully completed a search drill, the joy on her face unmistakable. "Maybe train the next generation. Make sure they understand it's not just about the work, it's about the partnership." Sarah smiled. "You've already done that. Every handler here learned from watching you too." That evening, Marcus drove to the cemetery on the edge of town. He parked near the section reserved for veterans and walked to a simple headstone. Sergeant James Chen, beloved son, 1985 to 2019 K-9 handler, United States Army. Marcus knelt, placing a small flag beside the stone. Blaze sat beside him, unusually still. "I think your dog found me," Marcus said quietly to the grave. "Don't know how, don't know why, but I want you to know I took care of him. He took care of me, too." Blaze lowered his head, pressing it against Marcus's leg. "We made something good together, something that's going to last." The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. Marcus stood, hand resting on Blaze's head. "Thank you for trusting me with him." 6 months later, on a cold December night, Marcus received the call he'd been dreading. "Unit 4, we have a structure fire on Old Mill Road. Reports of possible occupants inside." His hands tightened on the wheel. Blaze stood in the back, already alert. "This is Unit 4, en route." They arrived to find a small house fully engulfed, flames shooting through the roof. Firefighters were just beginning to set up, but it was clear the structure was seconds from collapse. A woman stood in the yard, screaming, My babies are inside." Marcus's training kicked in immediately. "How many? Where?" "2. Upstairs bedroom. Please." He looked at the house. The stairs would be gone, the smoke too thick. It was a death trap. Blaze barked once, sharp and commanding, staring at the house. Marcus looked at his partner. The dog's eyes met his, and in that moment, everything else fell away. "You sure?" Marcus whispered. Blaze barked again. Marcus grabbed a thermal blanket and wet it with a hose. He wrapped it around himself, then knelt beside Blaze. "Find them. Partner. Find them and get them out." Blaze darted forward. Marcus followed. The heat was unbearable. Smoke choked every breath. Marcus could barely see 3 feet ahead, but Blaze moved with certainty, navigating through the chaos. They found the stairs half collapsed, flames licking up the walls. Blaze didn't hesitate. He bounded up, disappearing into the smoke. Marcus climbed after him, each step a prayer. At the top, Blaze was scratching at a door. Marcus kicked it open. 2 children, maybe 5 and 7, huddled in the corner, unconscious from smoke. Marcus grabbed them both, one under each arm, and turned back toward the stairs. The ceiling groaned, beams cracked. "Blaze, go!" The dog led the way, barking to guide Marcus through the blinding smoke. They hit the stairs just as the ceiling began to collapse behind them. Marcus stumbled, nearly falling, but kept moving. His lungs screamed, his vision tunneled. Then they were through the door, into the night air, onto the grass. Firefighters rushed forward, taking the children. Paramedics surrounded them. Marcus collapsed to his knees, coughing violently. Blaze pressed against him, panting hard, his fur singed but alive. "You crazy dog," Marcus gasped, wrapping his arms around him. "You beautiful, crazy dog." Behind them, the house collapsed with a roar. But the children were breathing. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. Safe. Both children survived. Their mother, Jennifer Walsh, visited Marcus in the hospital the next day, tears streaming down her face as she thanked him over and over. "You and that dog," she whispered. "You're angels." Marcus shook his head, wincing from the oxygen mask. "Just doing our job." But when she left, Marcus looked at Blaze, who lay beside his hospital bed, and felt the weight of those words. Maybe she was right. Maybe some angels did have 4 legs and a wagging tail. On a warm summer evening, Marcus stood on his porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Blaze lay beside him, gray now more prominent, his movement slower but his spirit unchanged. The phone rang. Marcus answered. "Officer Webb? This is Ethan. Ethan Miller." Marcus smiled. "Ethan, good to hear your voice. How are you?" "I'm good. Really good. I wanted to tell you something." "What's that?" "I got accepted. To the police academy. I start in the fall." Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. "Ethan, that's incredible." "I wanted to thank you. For everything. For saving me. For showing me what it means to help people." Marcus's throat tightened. "You're going to be a great officer, kid." "I hope so." "And Officer Webb? When I graduate, I want to work with K9S. Just like you and Blaze." Marcus looked down at his partner, who lifted his head as if sensing the importance of the moment. "Then you'll be following in the footsteps of a true hero." When Marcus hung up, he sat on the porch steps, Blaze's head resting in his lap. "You hear that, partner? You're still changing lives." Blaze's tail thumped softly. The stars began to appear, one by one, filling the sky with light. Marcus thought about the night 3 years ago when a stray dog appeared on a dark highway, refusing to be ignored, how that single moment of trust had changed everything. "I don't know if you believe in fate," Marcus said quietly, "but I think you were always meant to find me. And I was always meant to follow." Blaze sighed contentedly, eyes half closed. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, "for choosing me." The night settled around them, peaceful and complete. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Somewhere, a child slept safely. Somewhere, hope continued to find its way forward, carried on 4 loyal paws and 1 man's willingness to listen when courage called. Sometimes miracles don't announce themselves with thunder from heaven or voices from angels dressed in white. Sometimes they arrive silently, covered in dust and scars, asking only that you pay attention to what your heart already knows is true. Officer Marcus Webb didn't know he needed saving until a stray German shepherd refused to let him look away. In that moment, standing on a dark highway with nothing but instinct to guide him, Marcus made a choice that would define the rest of his life he chose to follow. And in following, he discovered something profound. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. That loyalty doesn't require words, only presence. And that sometimes, the greatest act of faith is simply trusting that the path you're on was meant for you, all along. Blaze didn't just save lives. He reminded everyone who witnessed his story that goodness still walks among us, that second chances are real, and that love true, unconditional love, transcends species, circumstance, and even death itself. If you've been moved by this story, share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes still exist, that miracles still happen, that somewhere out there, loyalty waits patiently to be recognized, and all it asks is that you listen when it calls. May you find the courage to follow when your own miracle appears. May you recognize the angels that walk on 4 legs and speak without words. And may you always remember that in a world that sometimes feels too dark to navigate, there are still lights that refuse to go out. The morning sun broke through the clouds over Pinewood Falls, casting long shadows across the police department parking lot. Marcus Webb sat in his patrol SUV, hands wrapped around a thermos of coffee that had long gone cold. Beside him, Blaze slept peacefully in the passenger seat, his graying muzzle resting on his paws. It had been 6 months since the fire on Old Mill Road, and Marcus could still smell the smoke sometimes when he closed his eyes. The burn scars on his forearms had healed, but the memory remained vivid. The heat, the collapsing ceiling, the weight of 2 children in his arms as Blaze led them through the inferno. The department had recommended Marcus take medical leave, but he'd refused. Work was what kept him grounded, kept him moving forward. And as long as Blaze was by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. His radio crackled to life. Unit 4, we have a welfare check requested at 1847 Riverside Drive. Neighbors report not seeing the resident in several days. Possible medical emergency. Marcus keyed the mic. Unit 4 responding. Blaze lifted his head immediately, ears pricked forward. Even at 7 years old, the dog's instincts were razor-sharp. Come on, partner. Let's go to work. They drove through the quiet streets of Pinewood Falls, past the diner where locals gathered for morning coffee, past the elementary school where children played on the playground, their laughter carrying on the wind. This was the town Marcus had sworn to protect, and every call mattered, no matter how routine it seemed. Riverside Drive was a narrow street lined with modest homes, most of them dating back to the 1962. Number 1847 sat at the end of the block, a small ranch-style house with peeling yellow paint and an overgrown lawn. The mailbox overflowed with uncollected letters. Marcus parked and stepped out, Blaze immediately at his side. The dog's nose lifted, sampling the air, and his tail dropped slightly, a signal Marcus had learned to recognize. Something was wrong. What do you smell, boy? Blaze moved toward the house, his gait purposeful. Marcus followed, noting the newspapers piled on the porch, the drawn curtains, the silence that felt too heavy. He knocked on the door. Pinewood Falls Police. Welfare check. No response. He tried the handle. Locked. Marcus walked around to the side of the house, peering through windows. The interior was dark, but he could make out the shape of furniture, a television screen reflecting dim light. Blaze stopped at the back door, pawing at it gently, then looked up at Marcus with that intense stare that said, clear as words, someone needs help. Marcus made the decision. He radioed dispatch. Unit 4, I'm making entry on possible medical emergency, requesting backup and medical standby. He tried the back door, also locked, but the window beside it was slightly ajar, the glass old and loose in its frame. Marcus used his baton to carefully widen the gap, then reached through to unlock the door. The smell hit him immediately when he stepped inside. Stale air, unwashed dishes, and something else, the metallic scent of blood. Police! I'm coming in! Blaze pushed past him, moving through the kitchen with purpose. Marcus followed, his hand instinctively resting on his holster. The dog led him down a narrow hallway to a closed bedroom door. Blaze scratched at it once, whining low in his throat. Marcus pushed the door open. An elderly man lay on the floor beside the bed, dressed in flannel pajamas. His face was pale, lips tinged blue, and a deep gash marked his forehead, where he'd clearly struck something when he fell. His breathing was shallow and labored. "Sir, can you hear me?" Marcus dropped to his knees, checking for a pulse. Weak but present. The man's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Help," he whispered. "Please." Marcus keyed his radio. "I need medical now. Male, approximately 70, possible stroke or a cardiac event. He's been down for at least 12 hours. Blaze lay down beside the man, pressing his warm body against him. The man's trembling hand found the dog's fur, clutching weakly. "You're going to be okay," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Help is coming." The man's lips moved. Alone, so alone. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. He'd seen this before: elderly residents living by themselves, no family nearby, falling through the cracks until it was too late. "Not anymore," Marcus said firmly. "You're not alone now." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Blaze remained perfectly still, sharing his warmth, his presence somehow anchoring the old man to consciousness. The paramedics arrived within minutes, and Marcus stepped back to let them work. They loaded the man identified as Donald Graves, 73, retired teacher, onto a stretcher and rushed him to the ambulance. As they pulled away, Marcus stood in the quiet house, looking around. Photos lined the walls, showing a younger Donald with a woman who was presumably his wife, both of them smiling at the camera. More recent photos showed the woman's absence, the smile in Donald's eyes fading with each passing year. Marcus found a calendar on the kitchen counter. Every day for the past 6 months had been marked with a simple X. Nothing else. No appointments, no plans. Just one day after another, crossed off and forgotten. Blaze nudged Marcus's hand with his nose, pulling him from his thoughts. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "We need to do something about this." That evening, Marcus sat across from Chief Torres in the chief's office. The older man listened carefully as Marcus explained what he'd found. Donald Graves had been lying on that floor for at least 2 days, Marcus said. No one checked on him, no one knew he was in trouble. Torres leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "He have family?" "A daughter in Seattle. She called for the welfare check after he didn't answer her weekly phone call. But that's it. No other contact. So, what are you proposing?" Marcus pulled out a folder he'd been preparing all afternoon. "We expand the K-9 program again, not just for search and rescue, but for community. Wellness checks. We pair our teams with social services to visit isolated seniors on a regular basis." Torres raised an eyebrow. "You want to turn police dogs into therapy dogs?" "Not therapy dogs, companion animals with trained handlers who can recognize signs of medical distress, depression, neglect. We call it the Silver Watch Program." Marcus opened the folder, showing Torres the research he'd compiled. Studies show that regular visits from trained K-9 teams reduce emergency calls by 30% in at-risk populations. The dogs provide companionship, the handlers provide oversight, and we catch problems before they become tragedies. Torres studied the papers, his expression thoughtful. "This would require funding. I know someone who might help with that." 2 days later, Marcus stood in the lobby of Pacific Northwest Bank, waiting to meet with Catherine Hartwell, the bank's senior vice president, and one of Pinewood Falls' most prominent philanthropists. Catherine was in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her silver hair swept back in an elegant bun. But her eyes, when she greeted Marcus, were warm. "Officer Webb, I was intrigued by your call. Something about expanding the K-9 program?" Marcus explained the Silver Watch initiative as they sat in her private office. Catherine listened intently, occasionally asking questions, her sharp mind clearly evaluating every aspect of the proposal. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "My mother died alone," she said finally, her voice soft. 3 years ago. She fell in her bathroom, couldn't reach the phone. It was 2 days before anyone found her. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry." Catherine looked at him directly. If this program had existed then, she might still be alive. "So yes, Officer Webb, I'll fund it. All of it." Marcus exhaled, relief flooding through him. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I want to be involved in the implementation. I want to make sure this works. Deal." 3 months later, the Silver Watch program launched with a ceremony at the community center. 5 K-9 teams had been trained specifically for wellness checks, each paired with a social worker. The teams would visit 43 isolated seniors across the county on rotating schedules. Marcus stood at the podium with Blaze beside him, looking out at the gathered crowd. He saw Donald Graves sitting in the front row, fully recovered now, his daughter beside him. He saw Catherine Hartwell, whose generous donation had made everything possible. And he saw dozens of elderly residents, many brought by family members, their faces hopeful. 3 months ago, Marcus began, I responded to a welfare check that changed how I see this job. An elderly man had fallen in his home and lay there for 2 days before anyone knew he needed help. He gestured to Donald, who nodded, his eyes misting. That's 2 days of pain, fear, and loneliness that no one should have to endure. But it happens all the time, especially to our seniors who live alone." Marcus looked down at Blaze. "This dog has taught me that sometimes the most important part of police work isn't catching criminals or responding to emergencies. It's showing up. It's letting people know they're not forgotten." His voice grew stronger. "The Silver Watch program is about more than wellness checks. It's about building connections. It's about reminding our seniors that they matter, that their community sees them, that they're not alone." The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Donald Graves approached Marcus, leaning on a cane but moving steadily. His daughter, Sarah, walked beside him. "Officer Webb," Donald said, extending his hand. "I wanted to thank you properly. You and that remarkable dog saved my life." Marcus shook his hand. "Just doing our job, sir." "No," Donald said firmly. "You did more than that. You saw me, not just the emergency, but the loneliness that led to it." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I feel terrible that I didn't know how isolated Dad had become. I called every week, but I didn't really see what was happening." "You can't blame yourself," Marcus said gently. "Life gets busy. That's why we're creating systems to help." Donald reached down to pet Blaze, who leaned into the touch. "This dog of yours, he's special." "He is. What's his story? Where did he come from?" Marcus smiled. "That's the mystery. He just showed up one night on a dark highway, led me to a burning trailer, and saved a little boy's life. We never found out who trained him or where he'd been. He didn't have a collar, no microchip, nothing." Donald's expression grew distant. "Sometimes the best things in life arrive unexpectedly. My wife used to say that angels don't always announce themselves." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Your wife was a wise woman." "She was. And she would have loved this program." Over the next 6 months, the Silver Watch program exceeded every expectation. Emergency calls from isolated seniors dropped by 42%. Depression screenings showed marked improvement among program participants. And perhaps most importantly, the seniors themselves reported feeling less alone. Marcus and Blaze visited 12 homes every week, each visit lasting about 30 minutes. They'd check on medical needs, ensure medications were being taken correctly, and simply provide companionship. The dogs were trained to recognize signs of distress, unusual odors, behavioral changes, physical decline, and alert their handlers. But it was the small moments that Marcus treasured most. The way elderly veterans would open up about their service when they saw Blaze's K9 vest, recognizing a fellow soldier. The way lonely widows would smile when Blaze rested his head in their laps, accepting gentle pets. The way isolated men would find their voices again, telling stories to an audience that never judged. One particular visit stood out. Marcus knocked on the Marcus door of Margaret Chen, an 81-year-old widow who lived in a small apartment on the edge of town. She answered with a bright smile, despite the walker she leaned on. Officer Webb and Blaze, right on time. She'd prepared tea and cookies, a ritual she insisted on for every visit. As they sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by photos of her late husband and 2 sons, Margaret talked about her week. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring her tea, "about starting a book club for the seniors in the program. We could meet once a month, discuss what we're reading. It would give us something to look forward to." Marcus smiled. "That's a great idea, Mrs. Chen. I'll mention it to the social services coordinator." "You know what's funny?" Margaret said, her eyes twinkling. 6 months ago, I was ready to give up. My husband had been gone 2 years, my sons live across the country, and I thought, what's the point anymore? Then you and Blaze started coming by. She reached out and stroked Blaze's fur. The dog had positioned himself beside her chair, close enough for comfort. This dog reminded me that companionship doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it's just about being present with someone, no words necessary. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I think Blaze would say you did the same for him." Margaret laughed. "Maybe we rescued each other." As they left, Marcus reflected on her words. Wasn't that what all of this was about? The mutual rescue that happened when people and animals showed up for each other with open hearts? That evening, Marcus sat on his porch watching the sunset, Blaze lay beside him, his breathing steady and peaceful. The dog's muzzle was almost entirely gray now, his movements slower, but his spirit remained undiminished. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Ethan Miller, who had graduated from the police academy 3 months earlier and was now working 2 counties over, starting K-9 training next week. Wish me luck, and tell Blaze I'm following in his paw prints. Marcus smiled and texted back, "He's proud of you. So am I." Another text came through, this one from Sarah Chen, the K-9 handler who had first evaluated Blaze years ago. She was retiring next month and moving to Arizona. "Heard about Silver Watch? You're doing exactly what I always knew you would, changing lives. That dog chose well when he chose you." Marcus set the phone down and looked at Blaze. "You hear that? You chose well." Blaze's tail thumped softly against the wooden boards. The months turned into seasons. Summer gave way to autumn, and autumn to winter. The Silver Watch program continued to grow, adding new teams and expanding to neighboring counties. Marcus received commendations from the governor, was featured in national law enforcement magazines, and was invited to speak at conferences about community-oriented policing. But his favorite part of every day remained the same: the quiet visits with seniors who had become friends, the simple joy of watching Blaze bring comfort to people who needed it most. It was a cold December morning when Marcus noticed the change. Blaze struggled to jump into the patrol SUV, something he'd never had difficulty with before. His breathing was labored, and he moved more stiffly than usual. Marcus immediately drove to the veterinary clinic, his heart hammering with worry he tried to suppress. Dr. Michael Torres, the chief's nephew, was a skilled veterinarian in his early 30s, with gentle hands and a straightforward manner. He examined Blaze thoroughly while Marcus stood by, hands clenched. Finally, Michael straightened and faced Marcus. "His heart is failing," he said quietly. "It's progressive, and given his age and the fact that we don't know his full medical history, there's not much we can do beyond medication to make him comfortable." Marcus felt the words hit him like a physical blow. "How long? 6 months, maybe a year. Hard to say. He's a tough dog, but the heart is a muscle, like any other. Eventually, it wears out." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. "Make the time count, Marcus. That's all any of us can do." That night, Marcus sat on his living room floor with Blaze's head in his lap. The dog gazed up at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Marcus felt tears he'd been holding back finally break free. "I'm not ready," he whispered. "I'm not ready to lose you." Blaze licked his hand gently, as if offering comfort. Marcus thought about everything this dog had given him: purpose, partnership, a reason to believe in goodness. Blaze had saved lives, inspired a community, and taught Marcus what it meant to serve with your whole heart. "We're going to make every day matter," Marcus said, his voice steadying. "However long we have left, we're going to live it fully." Over the next months, Marcus adjusted their schedule. They still made their Silver Watch visits, but shorter ones, with more rest breaks. Blaze continued to work because that's what brought him joy. The connection with people, the sense of purpose. The seniors noticed the change and responded with tenderness. Margaret Chen baked special treats for Blaze, soft ones that were easy on his aging teeth. Donald Graves installed a ramp on his porch so Blaze wouldn't have to navigate stairs. Others simply offered more gentle pets, longer moments of quiet companionship. One spring afternoon, Marcus and Blaze visited a new participant in the Silver Watch program. Thomas Morrison was a 7-year-old veteran who had recently moved to Pinewood Falls after his wife's death. He lived in a small house near the forest, surrounded by silence. When Marcus knocked, Thomas answered looking haggard, his eyes hollow with grief. "Officer Webb?" "Yes, sir. This is Blaze. We're here for your first Silver Watch visit." Thomas looked at the dog, and something shifted in his expression. He stepped aside to let them in. The house was sparse, barely furnished, as if Thomas hadn't bothered to unpack his life. Photos remained in boxes, curtains unopened. "I apologize for the mess," Thomas said quietly. "I haven't had the energy to settle in." "No need to apologize," Marcus said. "Would you mind if Blaze said hello?" Thomas nodded, and Blaze moved forward, approaching the veteran with careful steps. When he reached Thomas, the dog sat and simply leaned against his leg, offering his presence. Thomas's hand found Blaze's fur, and his face crumpled. "I had a dog," he whispered, "in Vietnam. German Shepherd, just like this one. His name was Duke. He saved my life 3 times over there." Marcus stayed quiet, letting the man talk. "When I came home, they wouldn't let me keep him. Said he had to stay with the military. I never saw him again." Thomas's voice broke. "I've spent 50 years wondering if he knew I didn't abandon him by choice." Blaze pressed closer, and Thomas sank to his knees, wrapping his arms around the dog. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Duke." Marcus felt tears sting his own eyes. He knelt beside them both. "He knew," Marcus said softly. "Dogs understand loyalty better than we do. He knew you loved him." Thomas wept into Blaze's fur, while the dog remained perfectly still, absorbing the man's grief with infinite patience. When Thomas finally pulled back, his eyes were clearer than they'd been when they arrived. "Thank you," he whispered. "Both of you." As they left an hour later, Marcus looked back to see Thomas standing in the doorway, something resembling hope flickering in his expression. "You're still doing it," Marcus murmured to Blaze. "Still healing people." That evening, Marcus received a call from Chief Torres. "Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up. There's a ceremony being planned for next month. The state is recognizing the Silver Watch program with a Community Service Award, and they specifically want to honor Blaze." Marcus felt a mix of pride and sadness. "He'll be honored. Chief, thank you." "How is he?" "Slowing down, but still fighting." Torres was quiet for a moment. "He's a good dog, Marcus. One of the best I've ever seen. He's more than good. He's extraordinary." The ceremony took place on a warm June morning in the town square. Hundreds of people gathered, seniors from the Silver Watch program, their families, local officials, fellow officers, and members of the community who had followed Blaze's story over the years. Marcus stood at the podium in his dress uniform, Blaze sitting beside him. The dog's breathing was labored, but he held his head high, that old military bearing still evident. The governor's representative stepped forward, holding a medal and a certificate. "It is my honor to present the State of Oregon's Meritorious Service Award to K9 Blaze, whose courage, loyalty, and service have saved lives and strengthened communities across this region." She knelt and carefully attached the medal to Blaze's collar. The dog sat perfectly, still, as if understanding the significance. The crowd rose to their feet, applause rolling like thunder across the square. Marcus looked out at the faces Ethan Miller, now a police officer, with his own K9 partner, standing proudly in uniform. Margaret Chen, Donald Graves, Thomas Morrison, and dozens of other seniors whose lives had been touched by Blaze's gentle presence. Catherine Hartwell, whose funding had made so much possible. Dr. Michael Torres, who had cared for Blaze with such dedication. And he thought about all the people not present, but whose lives had been forever changed. The little boy pulled from a burning trailer 7 years ago. The 2 children rescued from a house fire. The missing hikers and lost children found in the wilderness. One dog, one choice to follow. And the ripple effect had reached hundreds of lives. When the ceremony ended, people lined up to say goodbye to Blaze, somehow sensing this might be their last chance. Each person knelt, petted him gently, whispered their thanks. Blaze accepted each gesture with grace, his tail wagging weakly, his eyes still bright with that unquenchable spirit. Thomas Morrison was among the last. He knelt stiffly, his weathered hands gentle as they stroked Blaze's gray muzzle. "Thank you for bringing my Duke back to me," he said quietly. "Even if only in spirit." Blaze licked his hand once, and Thomas smiled through tears. That night, Marcus carried Blaze up onto his porch, something he'd never had to do before. They sat together under the stars, the summer air warm and fragrant with pine. "You did good, partner," Marcus whispered. "Better than good. You showed everyone what it means to serve with your whole heart." Blaze sighed contentedly, his head resting in Marcus's lap. "I don't know how I'm going to do this without you," Marcus admitted, his voice breaking. "You've been my compass, my partner, my best friend." The dog's eyes found his, and in them Marcus saw peace, acceptance, and something that looked almost like gratitude. "I'll make sure your legacy continues," Marcus promised. "Every team we train, every life we touch, they'll all be because of you." 2 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Blaze passed away peacefully in his sleep, Marcus beside him. The funeral was held on a hillside overlooking Pinewood Falls. Hundreds of people attended, more than had come to most human funerals in the town's history. A honor guard of K-9 officers and their dogs stood at attention as Blaze was laid to rest, his collar and medals placed carefully beside him. Marcus stood before the gathering, his voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm him. "I used to think I saved Blaze when I followed him that night 7 years ago. But the truth is, he saved me. He saved all of us." He looked out at the crowd. "He taught me that heroism isn't about grand gestures or seeking glory. It's about showing up, day after day, with love and loyalty and an unshakable commitment to those who need you." His voice grew stronger. "Blaze's story doesn't end here. It continues in every K-9 team we train, in every senior we visit, in every life we touch, because he showed us the way." He placed a hand on the simple stone marker. "Rest easy, partner. Your work is done, and we'll take it from here." In the months that followed, Marcus continued with the Silver Watch program, though the patrols felt emptier without Blaze beside him. He trained new K-9 teams, sharing everything the dog had taught him about patience, intuition, and the power of presence. The town commissioned a statue of Blaze to stand in the town square, with an inscription that read, "A faithful servant whose loyalty knew no bounds." He led us through darkness and taught us to see light. Ethan Miller visited often, his own K-9 partner, a German shepherd named Justice, already showing signs of the same remarkable intuition Blaze had possessed. "Do you think they know?" Ethan asked one evening as they sat on Marcus's porch. "The dogs, I mean. Do they understand how much they mean to us?" Marcus watched Justice lying contentedly at Ethan's feet and smiled. "I think they understand better than we do. They don't need words or ceremonies. They just know love when they see it." 1 year after Blaze's death, Marcus stood in the town square at the unveiling of a new program, the Blaze Memorial Scholarship, which would fund K-9 training for rural departments across the Pacific Northwest. Catherine Hartwell stood beside him, along with Chief Torres, now retired, but still deeply involved in the community. Blaze showed us that one life, lived with purpose, can change the world, Catherine said to the gathered crowd. This scholarship ensures his legacy will continue for generations. That evening, Marcus visited Blaze's grave on the hillside. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. He sat on the grass, looking out over the town they'd served together. "I miss you, every day," he said quietly. "But I feel you still. In every K-9 team that goes out to serve, in every life that's saved, in every person who chooses to follow when instinct calls." A breeze rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. Marcus smiled. "Yeah, I know you're still with me." As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Marcus stood and made his way back down the hillside. Behind him, carved into the simple stone marker, were the words that would endure long after memory faded. Blaze, faithful partner, hero, friend. He followed his calling, and in doing so, taught us all to follow ours. The work continued, the lives were changed, the legacy grew, and somewhere, in the space between memory and eternity, a German shepherd with gray muzzle and knowing eyes watched over them all, his duty never truly finished, his loyalty never diminished, his love never forgotten. Sometimes miracles don't end when the moment passes. Sometimes they echo forward through time, carried by those who witnessed them and chose to keep the flame alive. Blaze's story became Pinewood Falls' story, and then it became something larger, a reminder that grace often arrives on 4 legs, that courage can be taught, and that love, once given freely, never truly dies. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments, what was your favorite moment? Was it Blaze's loyalty, Marcus's courage, or the moment justice and mercy met? We read every comment. God bless, and see you in the next story.